All right. Awesome. Welcome everyone to the Wallet Interoperability Special Interest Group call for February 26th, 2025. Today on the agenda, we will hear about test suites, an overview of evolving interoperability and conformance landscape for digital identity. So from Patrick St. Louis. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and we're looking forward to the presentation. We are recording the call. It'll be posted here on the meeting page later today. We are following the Linux Foundation Antitrust Policy and the OpenWallet Foundation Code of Conduct. An announcement that I want to make sure to mention is that this SIG is going to have a time change. The alternating schedule, having it at a different time each week has been tough. And so we've decided to move this call to Mondays at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Central Europe. That will be effective next week. So yeah, on Monday, March 3rd at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Central Europe, Stephen will talk about DidWebVH. And from then on, the calls will all be at the same time on Monday. For those of you in Europe, the March 10th, 17th, and 24th calls will be at 4 p.m. Central Europe due to the different daylight savings time schedules. After this call, you should be able to regenerate the calendar invitation. Sean didn't want to mess with it earlier because it would mess up this meeting. And so, yeah, any questions or concerns about that time change? Awesome. Are there any other announcements or introductions before we get started? All right, let's see if there are no other announcements or updates that anybody would like to give before we kick things off. I think I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Char, for getting the meeting started. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start by giving a very short introduction about myself. So I've been in the digital identity space for about 5 years, 4.5 probably. I come from a networking and cybersecurity educational background. So previous to digital identity, I was enjoying participating to different cybersecurity competitions, doing mostly pen testing. And after this, I pivoted in a sort of DevOps role at the Digital Identity Laboratory of Canada, where we spent a lot of time looking at test suites and existing digital identity frameworks. So I've been following test suites and their evolution for pretty much those 4 or 5 years. Every year there's a little bit that change. You know, the ecosystem goes a little bit further. There's new specifications that come to see the day. Some gain more traction, some lose traction, and different entities have different approach for how they conduct test suites, how they see interoperability happen. So today I want to give another presentation. I've given a few of these in the past, and I just want to give another one that's updated to the flavor of the day to start off the new year, and get some discussions about which one maybe some people here are involved in some of these test suites. Maybe some people want to use them, or maybe some people will learn something new. So before I start, I want to share the link to this slide that I presented. There's not so much text in this slide, but there's a lot of links. So I think it'd be a really good resource. Sometime we want to find a link to a specific test suite and we need to do some research on Google and so on. So I think I did a fairly good job at going around, capturing some of the links, some of the reports. So you can sort of bookmark this presentation or maybe keep the link somewhere. I'm sure it'd be a useful resource when in need. With this being said, I'm gonna share my screen. We're gonna go through this slide that I presented, and then I might click on some of the links, go visit some of the reports, and so on. So just want to, as per usual, can you guys confirm that you see my presentation open?
Yes, looks great.
Awesome. So my name is Patrick Saint-Louis. As of about a year and a half, I now work for while I started the company Open Security and Identity. It's located in Quebec in Canada. My goal is really to assist government and private organization and choosing the right tools for their digital identity needs. I can help with conformance testing, and I do, as the titles say, put a lot of emphasis on having open and interoperable standards being adopted in favor of proprietary solution. I think open standards are really the way to build a strong ecosystem. So let's get started. At start, we're going to go, there's a couple of slides of more concepts. So there's 2 or 3 slides of more sort of what I've come to classify or categorize test suite as by experimenting with them, and then we'll take a deep dive in each of these categories. So I found there's 4 sort of families of application that would consider the test suite landscape. So the first one is really the public test suites that we refer to. These are usually open source projects maintained by specific organizations. So this is where we can think of the W3C test suites, the OpenWallet Foundation, Agent Test Harness, the Akrida project. They are really projects that are designed to test, help implementers, as I mentioned, it's to help implementers demonstrate that they've implemented a specification. So oftentimes these test suites are based on a specification that exists, and their goal is to test what's referred to as normative statements in a specification. So the thing that implementers need to follow. And at the end of the test suite, you'll get assigned some kind of score. Usually you'll have some kind of report available. So that's the first category. Second category is open tooling. There's a sort of linear path to these categories. So open tooling is something we can think a lot of people probably know the Uni Resolver, for example, right? It's a development tool out there that's meant to resolve DID. The Uni Verifier. I'm going to go into more details later in the slide about which open tooling I know of. And these are usually software that have implemented a specification and are designed to be sort of tinkered with and out there hosted for the general public to use. I want to emphasize the word hosted. The great thing about open tooling is that these implementation are out there. You can use them to validate the work you're doing. I'm thinking about something like the JSON LD playground. Everybody can use them. You can also deploy them, but the fact that they're hosted there is very useful when you're in a pinch. Third category, certification bodies. So this are delegated entities that going to conduct a certification assessment. It could be based on a public test suite, or sometimes it's like a proprietary testing solution. So the first thing that comes to mind here is the famous ISO standard body with the MDL. So you can get the MDL certification. However, there's a cost associated for that. And as far as I know, there's no open sourced officially provided test suite for MDL. There are MDL test suites, but the sort of certification path is behind some kind of paywall. And then lastly, very similar to open tooling is what I call the public showcase. So a good example for that is the BC Wallet showcase. So these are also sort of an implementer's product. They can be used for interoperability testing. I can try to do the BC Wallet showcase with my wallet and, test it with that. The only difference I would say with open tooling is oftentimes these public showcase will be more specific to a use case, right? They're going to tell the story, they're going to show a product use in a specific context, as open tooling are really meant for people to tinker around with. So these are the four sort of families of test categories that I've kind of came up with here. Now for the types of testing, I divide this between test-driven conformance and behavior-driven interoperability. So these come from the terms test-driven development and behavior-driven development. So the test-driven conformance for me is really to strictly test against a specification. It's a very technical test, right? Can your software do this? Does it do it properly? Has behavior-driven is a little, the way I see it is a little step further than that is once you've got the technical conformance down, well, can your software go through this, specific scenario, like kind of simulating a real world use case? So this, I think a lot of the OpenWallet lab agent test harness, where you clearly identify some actors, you have your issuer, holder, verifier, you say, I want to issue this credential and go through this flow of issuing, verifying, revoking, verifying. So there's a bit more of a story going on. Usually with behavior driven, you're going to keep track of states, right? So when we talk about credential exchange, we want to keep track of the states of the exchange and ensure that we can move on to the next step, as testing conformance is really, can you issue a credential, right? Does that work? Can you revoke the credential? And usually they're not, these testing blocks are not going to piece together, but it's more of an input output testing. So testing driven conformance, great for testing specification. Behavior driven interop, obviously great for testing more specific interoperability. Okay, so let's get started with the test suite. There's no order for this. I just put them as I thought about them. And these, all of these I've had a first-hand experience with, except maybe one of them, which is a new one, which I'm going to talk about at the end, at least a new one for me. So probably the most infamous one is the series of test suite from the W3C. Obviously, W3C verifiable credential had a huge impact on the community since their inception. There's a lot of different opinions about verifiable credential, but nonetheless, it's probably the most complete set of test suite that exists to date. They test many different specifications. The three sort of specification, or the four specification that are interesting to look at right now, obviously the VC data model 2.0, VC bitstring status list, and then the VC data integrity with the EDDSA and ECDSA crypto suite. BBS test crypto suite also exists. However, this one is not being sort of pursued as becoming a recommendation at the time being. There was a demand in just to move forward the data model 2.0, bitstring status list, and then the EDDSA and ECDSA crypto suite. So at the W3C, they have obviously the specification for each of these things. And then for each specification, there is a specific test suite going on. They publish these reports publicly, so you can click on these links. You can see really quick who are the implementers and how well they're doing comparing to the spec. So this is great. And this is the type, when I was explaining earlier, this is really a conformance test. So it's sort of input-output testing against very specific normative statements from each of the specification. And each normative statement has a test case or more written against it. This includes positive and negative testing. So this is really to ensure that software behaves correctly when they receive, so when they process certain payload, in this case, verifiable credentials. These set of test suites are probably the one that has the largest amount of demonstrated implementers. There's currently a total of 20 plus implementers. I'll show at the end, I have a slide on open reporting, this application called CanIVC that you can really see a sort of aggregation from all these different test suites. The goal of these test suites is to promote the specification to a recommendation stage. Once this is done, we will most likely see this test suite pivot into some kind of conformance assessment framework. You can go at this repo called the VC test suite implementations to see the list of all the implementations. So we can see there's quite a few implementers. It might not look like much, it might be like, oh, that's only 30, but that 30 is a huge number when we come to public. And these are just the people publicly stating that they implement this, right? So that we can be sure that there's a lot more than this. If you have any question, I don't know, raise your hand or just let me know. Otherwise, I'm just gonna move on and we'll have a formal question series at the end. Another work item at the W3C is the traceability interoperability. So these test suite are Postman driven, so they provide a Postman collection. From having implemented the traceability, this was probably my favorite testing methodology. It makes it, once you set up your Postman environment, you import the collection, it makes it very, very easy to test your implementation. You can call, each step individually. You don't have to run the whole test suite every time. You can clearly see what is expected. This was probably the most useful test suite for building an implementation. They also provide some reporting. So for this, I did an implementation for province of British Columbia. So we can see here the different scores. The reports are interesting here. I find them a little bit convoluted. There's a lot of information on these reports. I find something like this a little bit easier to see, right? Easier to know what's going on. While there's a lot of information here, there's a lot. Probably because of the text. It's still kind of useful. You can kind of see, the different implementation and what they do. But I guess you can sort of have a deep dive in the details. So they have a conformance and then a sort of interoperability matrix here. Same thing, a lot of information. I find this reporting a bit aggressive at first glance. They have also an API specification. So, and I didn't mention, but these test suites are a series of Mocha test suites. So they're JavaScript, they're written in JavaScript. And both of these, so to publish these reports, these test suites are ran through GitHub Actions, right? On a weekly basis, I think. And these reports are just GitHub pages publishing the report. So next one, so the OpenWallet Foundation Testing Lab. So this will be probably relevant to some people here. I'm just gonna open this a little bit. So there's 3 sort of formal tests work effort happening right now. There's the agent test harness, the Akrida load testing, and then the mobile wallet test harness. These are all really interesting. I think these, for me, they're probably the most impressive to look at. I really like the agent test harness. I've had a lot of experience with the agent test harness. I have some architecture diagram we can look at later on. This is more, so when I was talking earlier about the behavior driven, so the all agent test harnesses really tells a story, but you're gonna have your issuer, verifier, holder, and then you will start the test. It will spin up some agents for all these roles and then go through a specific scenario that you outline. So they use these feature files. So these are BDD concepts. So you say like kind of the story you want to tell with your test, the type of credential you want to use. And you say, well, I want my issuer to be using Akapai. I want my verifier to be using some other frameworks. I want my holder to be using Credo. You can even say, I want my holder to be a mobile wallet, and they have a sort of mobile wallet shim that you can use to prompt the user to accept the credential and so on to move the test forward. And then at the end, you have a nice report that says what went wrong or what went right. So really like this. The Aula Crida, also really interesting. So it's nice to have a place for all load testing needs. So this one is based on a framework called Locus. It's a Python framework designed for load testing. So the goal of this is to simulate a certain number of holders and to put some stress tests on some infrastructure. What's good about this is you can point this load testing to your own infrastructure and conduct the test in there and see, well, at which point of load do I start to see some delays, right? Where does things start failing? What's my capacity? So people can run numbers closer to the sort of scenarios they expect for their load. If you have a supply chain verifier, you could expect a higher volume of transaction than a point of sales, for example, and so on. So this is really good. And these days, it's what I'm spending the most time with, as I'll explain at the end. And then the mobile wallet test harness, very similar to agent test harness, except this one is, while the agent test harness is more to test interop between different agents and framework, mobile wallet test harness is really more focused around mobile wallet features. I don't have too much experience with this one, but as I understand it, it's really to test mobile specific features, not really, not so much the issuance or the verification, but more how the mobile sort of behaves with this. So really good stuff at the OpenWallet Foundation. Another project I'm involved is the United Nations Transparency Protocol. So this is a supply chain oriented sort of specification. They have this is an extension. So they use verifiable credential, right? They use W3C verifiable credential, but they extend it and define these sort of types of credential for their needs. So they have these core families of credential, right? Like a product passport, a conformance credential. They have traceability events credentials, facility record, and the a specific type that's gaining a lot of traction is called the digital identity anchor credential. So this is a like a business registration, right? You could see that at the digital identity anchor is when an authority makes a statement about an entity that this entity can use to had some validity of their claims, right? So if they get a credential from the the business registrar of some state that they are a registered business in that state, they can then show that credential, and whoever cares about business registered in that state can sort of verify it. The entity could have many different of these credentials. Anyway, getting a bit sidetracked here. As far as test suites, so they have a set of test suites. What's really interesting, they have mock apps that they provide. So to have a UNTP implementation, you need a few different components. So they provide mock apps for every one of these components. I believe their mock apps, the issuer is based on Veramo. That's what I heard the last time, for those that are familiar with this. They have hosted instance of the mockups, and they're all open source, so people can stand these up. They use this software that I really liked. It's called Jargon. It's one of the developers there on the Australian government. This is really nice to model your credentials, so you can create these. So you see here, you have like a digital product passport. You can create these things, and after you model, it's going to generate for you a vocabulary file is going to generate a context file for JSON LD processing and a JSON schema. So it's really good to kind of see the credentials and brainstorm some model. You can edit it. It's really straightforward, and it's great to provide some kind of fixtures, right, that you want to test against. So these are available. It also provides a sample of a credential that would match this. These sort of types can be versioned. So this is a great stuff. So we can see here the artifact. They have a README, Open API specification, JSON LD context, JSON schema. So this is really a great resource. It's a great product that creates all these in one place. So I thought that was really interesting. And finally, they have a little playground. So this is just a really nice sort of upload your credential, and then it's going to tell you how well you've done, right? So you upload a credential here, a JSON LD file, then it's going to run a few tests. Their tests are mostly based around schema, so JSON schema. So, do you match the schema has been set? And then there's some JSON LD processing, and then you can do some verification. They use mostly VC Jose to secure the credentials. So those who are familiar with that, this is how it works here. This is undergoing, right? They're trying to reach 1.0. So I've been helping a little bit with these test suites, and they have some, they just made some improvement. And I think the latest version, which is the 0.6 beta, is finally sort of starting to be functional. So that's really good. I mentioned at the beginning I work for this place called the Digital Identity Laboratory of Canada. So they actually renamed to Digital Trust Laboratory of Canada recently. And they have this digital trust test bench. So I was part of this effort when it started. The vision for this was to bring a sort of unified user experience to drive all these open source test suites. So there's an API and a front end. And so if you want to run the W3C test suite and you want to run a agent test harness, like you could all drive them through a UI with a similar experience, and you would capture your configuration, and then it would launch some containers in the back end, run the test, and then give you your report back. So it was supposed to be this sort of open test suite orchestrator, and they came a pretty long way. So they have some VC testing and DID testing. You create an account, right? You have an account, then you can run your tests and keep your reports. And they have some interesting integration with other software. I know for the DID testing, they've been making integration with the GoDaddy software, which has obviously a lot of validation around DIDs and stuff like that. So it's a great tool for not only testing, but also learning about these different things, because it's meant really to it didn't assume anything about the end user. It doesn't assume that it was specifically for developers. This could be for anyone. So they did a good job of, as you can test your stuff, to explain to you a little bit what's happening. Because oftentimes you're going to have people who are in a position, they're asked to, make this verifiable credential stuff work, and they're not too familiar with it. And it can be difficult to find information about it somewhere. There's a lot out there, but you need to look for it and digest it, because as probably knows, digital identity often builds on many subsequent concepts. And when you learn about verifiable credential, well, you're going to have to learn about DIDs. You're going to have to learn about cryptographic suites, and there's all these building blocks. So it's nice to have some educational resource mixed in with testing. So that's this is planned to be open sourced fairly soon. I think that was part of the plan. So more to come on there. ISO MDL certification. Obviously, MDL is gaining a lot of traction. So that's the mobile driving license. There's a ISO standard. They have a certification process. ISO is always a little bit not as open as other frameworks, right? So there's a certification path, but you need to get in touch with a certification body. They will test your application against the ISO standard, and then you can get the certificate. Not too much to say about this. I put some links here about their certification process and the link to the ISO spec if you wish to purchase it. OpenID certification. So this one, they also have a certification path. The only difference is they actually have a test suite open out there. If you look in there, there is some OID for VP stuff. I don't think they have an official OID for VP certification, but it's sort of part of their broader conformance suite. So you can actually stand this up. You will have all the required components to test for OID for VP in a solution. They don't have issuance. They only have presentation at the moment, but this is there. It's great. I got to talk with the person in charge at IIW, and it's great people doing great stuff here. Yeah, this slide is not finished. The other ones are. Remove this. So I just wanted to put a slide. Plugfest are events that exist, right? I didn't have time to capture some, but there's a few Plugfest that exist. These are events, community-driven events that people kind of the goal of a Plugfest is going to be like to usually to implement a new feature across various implementations. So there could be a Plugfest around, for example, OID for VP, right? So there would be a Plugfest around OID for VP. People bring their wallets. There's a few implementation, and people implement this standard in their application, and then they get to present their work. So they're a bit like, Hackfest, Plugfest, these kind of development events that people get to showcase what they're working on. So this was the new one I was talking at the beginning. So at least new for me, I recently read about that, the FIDS community. So they have this open sandbox environment. I want to learn more about this. If people here are involved with this, feel free to reach out to me. This is probably what I'll be kind of having a look, because this looks very promising. This seems to be a sort of sandbox environment where you can have organizational wallets, personal wallets. So I'm curious to see what is possible to do with this. I haven't signed up yet, so you can sort of log in. I'm really curious to see what is possible to do with this environment. I think that's a great ground for some very interesting scenario interoperability testing. So I'm not too sure exactly how it works, but it's well presented and it seems to be pretty promising. So just wanted to put this out there. So for the showcase, I only put 3. Again, feel free to edit this slide. If you know any solution, put a comment. I will add it to this slide, definitely. The VC Playground. So this is a playground to issue, verify credential. It's natively meant to work with sort of CHAPI enable. So you can just issue your credentials. So you get a credential issued here, and it's meant to interact with the credential handler API in the browser. So the idea is that you would install a wallet and then put it in your app. You can also sort of issue a credential, right? You can get a VC API exchange, an OIDC for VCI exchange. So this is between a showcase and a sort of open tooling playground. You have different VC data model. You can configure, what type of exchange you want to do. And one thing that's very interesting is that you can select different issuers. Why can't I select a different issuer here? Okay. You can select an issuer depending on which model. I think 1.1 probably has a little bit more. There we go. And these are all VC test suite implementers, right? So once you pass the VC test suite, you should theoretically be able to just plug and play your implementation in here. So this is really interesting. At the beginning, I was saying, you have the public test suite, and then you have the open tooling, which is usually one of the implementers being able to provide a tool. This is a great demonstration of this, right? So when people pass the WC VC test suites, it means that they have an application like an issue credential, and then they can, there's always going to be a little tweaking necessary, but they should be very close to just being able to be plug and play, swapped out for any of these, and they can issue these credentials to a wallet, right? Either a browser wallet, a mobile wallet, as long as you can understand either OIDC exchange or so on. We're kind of talking to add a like a DIDCOM tab in here, right? It would be possible to exchange this credential over DIDCOM. So that's been on my plate. There's desire to have it here. There just needs to be the time to do it. So that's that. Where was I? The BC Wallet showcase, right? Really interesting. This is very specifically to show the BC Wallet. There's a few scenarios, right? And again, like I was saying, these are really more closer to a real experience, right? So you show, well, a real experience, a real scenario. There's a bit more of a story behind these than just here's a random credential. So this, you go through they have these personas, right, that you're going to be enacting, like behaving as, and then you can go through the steps. You can either use the BC wallet, but you can also use any wallet that's interoperable with the DIDCOM issuance protocol. So I have a list of wallets it could work with. And then you go through the step, you accept the credential, then you're going to present it in some scenarios, present some claims. So this is really interesting. And then they made another version for the city of Vancouver, right? So the same thing, same sort of experience, different scenarios, right? And I also want to point out that this showcase code was developed by Animo. So Animo are a very significant player in the wallet space. They've been doing excellent work for some time, and this is their sort of application. I think they contributed, and I believe it was a code with us with BC. So same thing here. You go through the steps, right? You have the issuance presentation and so on. So great. I'm sure there's other showcase. Please just comment and add the showcase. I always like these. I think these are a great testing resource as well. Open tooling, there's a few on the JSON LD playground. So this is great for testing verifiable credentials, especially if you're designing some. You want to make sure that you get your context properly set. It's going to give you some errors, and you can do some JSON LD operations on your credential. I use this quite often. One thing that's good about open tooling is also you can show people, right? I can give the playground link, take a screen cap, and tell someone like, look, this doesn't work, and they can try it themselves without having to spin up some containers, spin up some application, just there hosted. This one is interesting. So the DHS is VIP, so they have some posted interoperability data on their GitHub. So there's a few credentials available. They use bitstring status list. They have revoked credential and so on. So this is a type of testing that they provide static data of with the technologies that they want to use for their software. And you can test, can my verifier process this data properly? And you can demonstrate it, right? So they have they have a did here, sample did, and then they have samples of signed credential, right? So they have, ECDC with it, this one with bad signature. So they have like positive and negative testing, they have some revoked credentials. So again, great type of resource to have. And this is a little bit closer to real world use case than just generic playground. The UNTP playground, I showed it earlier. This was the UNTP that you upload your stuff. The Uni suite, so they have Uni Resolver, resolving did, Uni Verifier, verifying credential, and Uni Issuer, issuing credential. This is great, right? I can issue a credential here with did key and crypto suite, and then go verify that credential with Akapai. It works. You can do the opposite, issue a credential with Akapai, go on the Uni Verifier, verify it there. Just great to show that, okay, our implementation are somewhat interoperable. Interoperability is a big word, so it's more than just verifying a credential, but you need to start somewhere. DCC Verifier Plus, so they have this Verifier Plus application that they put out there, same thing, except this one is specifically designed to verify diploma's credential and education credential. It also interacts with the credential handler protocol, just like we saw on the VC playground. And it's great. What they do at Digital Credential is very interesting. So they're focused around the education. So, right, issuing diplomas, presenting diplomas. So they have a wallet, open source wallet available. Great stuff going on there. So the other part that's important of testing is the reports, right? So when you run a test suite, you're going to get results. You're going to get the results of your test suite, but then you want to present them in some way that people can share it, right? So, and depending who's going to see it, you're going to have different kind of reports, right? If you give a report to your development team, it's not going to be the same as if you give a report to whoever's in charge of the project that needs to present it to other communities. So the CanIVC one is great. So this is a sort of aggregation of all the W3C test suites. So we saw earlier, I'm starting to have a lot of tabs here. So we saw here, for example, the conformance result for one of the, the VC data model. Well, CanIVC is going to aggregate all of these and present them in a way that you can sort of take a deep dive in the implementation, see what they support, right? So these are different crypto suite, different test suites. They're kind of breaking down between issue and verifier features. So this is what I mean when I say like you want to do a report from the results, and you can really present the information how you want it. You just want it to be a way that's pretty digestible. So you can see the list of all the implementations here across all their test suites. So this is great. Of course, the one we're all familiar with, I'm assuming we're all familiar, but maybe not. Maybe that's not true. The Aries agent, now known as the OpenWallet lab agent test harness. So this is really to test these frameworks working together. I want to say one thing I'd really like, and it's kind of what I'm working towards, is kind of a mix between the way they test it and the way tests are happening here, meaning test Aries interoperability information between implementers, not just frameworks, right? This would be good. There's progress being made to that. So instead of having Akapai and Credo, well, you would have like the government of British Columbia issuer, right? Versus, I don't know, some business that verifies stuff. So different implementers instead of testing the framework. I think that could be an interesting evolution or something adjacent to this. So this is the last like sort of slide. So I just want to present a bit what some of the things I've been sort of working on. So I've been working a lot lately on the WebVH specification. So that's a new DID method, and more specifically issuing anon cred. So we just got the initial version of the Akapai plugin, so we can now issue, present, revoke add-on creds in WebVH. So I made a simple application for that. This would fall in the sort of open tooling idea. So you connect your wallet, then you go through the steps of refreshing, and then as you progress, you can issue a credential, request a credential, revoke a credential. There's some features here. You can see the data that will be sent to the credential. There's a couple links, right? So I can see my anon-cred schema, can have a look at the content of the schema, the proof here, data integrity proof, some links. And here you have, this is the revocation registry. So as you get issued a credential, you're going to be assigned an index on there. So this is a little tool to help testing with this. So that the next step we're at is, for example, implementing this in Credo. We have someone on the team, and a tool like this is really useful. You have the infrastructure there. You can just test your code with it. The all interface, similar idea to the DT Lab thing, except I want this to be like an open solution. So I have like probably going to give more update to that, but I have like a mock-up concept of what I see. So this would be to, some of the thing that I've just presented to, again, provide a sort of simple interface to run these test suites. So the VC test suites, for example, right? You need an issuer value, you need an endpoint for your implementation, and then you can tag different features, run a test, and then open your report once you've run the test. And sort of provide a uniform interface for all these. And the idea is that this is all Docker based, so someone could run this UI application on their environment, and when they run each of the tests, it just deploys the necessary components on their local host, runs the test, and then give them access to the report. I didn't run anything right now, so there's not going to be a report, but they would download it afterwards. So I'm giving this a shot. I'll have something working here and see if this could be interest if people maybe present it, sort of a test suite orchestrator. Another project I'm working on is called the Pidentity Wallet. So this is really could be summarized as a mobile extension for Akapi. So it's a web app that you install on your wallet, and you're basically connected to an Akapi instance. You have a sub-wallet on multi-tenant agent, and it just, for example, provides a webcam feature right to Akapi, so you can scan an invitation, and the wallet is just going to forward it to Akapi. So this could be a great development tool. Again, there's going to be a lot more information soon. Still trying to find a way where I could maybe host this. I plan to make this an open source thing. Akrita Plus, it's not really a thing. It's just what I'm working on right now is to add, so Akrita is the load testing thing, and I want to add support for, I say multi-ledger, but what I mean here is really support for different DID methods. Mostly, the anon-creds WebVH, but there's also a lot of different anon-creds registry that were presented lately. I'm thinking about the Hedera, right? There's checkd, and it'd be great if we could use the same sort of locus configuration file, but just swap out the registry and do some interesting performance comparison there. So this is what I'm actively working on right now, sort of trying to think how we can take the existing Akrita project and expand on it to use AIPv2 and so on. So this is what I'm working on. You can get into some architecture diagram. So I have a diagram for the agent test harness, Akrita, and the VC test suite. So there's two ways to run the agent test harness. The first one here is fully automated. So you have the test client, and then there's something called a back channel. A back channel, you can really see it. Let me zoom in a little bit. The back channel, you can really see it as a, what's going on? Oh, sorry. Zoom in. Okay. The back channel is a sort of APIs, open API specification that different frameworks going to implement. So there's a common API interface, and then they make a integration with their framework. So the issuing agent, holder agent, verifying agent could be like I could have an Occupy agent as the issuing agent. I could have a Credo as the holder and Aries VCX as the verifying. And they're all going to have their back channel, which is a sort of common API interface that the test client can send the instructions with. And these back channels are going to be responsible for being aware of the state changes that happen. So usually they will send an instruction to the agent, and the agent will send some kind of webhook back to the back channel when a state change. So when my issue agent issues a credential to the holder, and the holder sends an acknowledgement that they've received and sort of credential, the issuing agent is going to send a state to the back channel saying, hey, the holder has received my credential, which the test client will then be able to detect and kind of move on to the next step in the test. So we have test client, a common set of API interfaces, they call it a component under test, right? So this is the component under test layer. It's really the thing. So this is what we are testing. We are testing the agents here, right? And then the VDR, right, is used for this. So this is could be an Indie Ledger, a WebVH server, or the checkd is just where they go read information. And then there's also the way to run it with a mobile. So there's a small change, small caveat here. It looks a bit convoluted, but all we added was a mediator here, right? There's a mediator. The reason for that is that mobiles, they don't have public endpoints, right? So when a issuing agent needs to contact the mobile, they will usually send the information to the mobile's mediator, which will then relay the message to the mobile. And the mobile can send its message to the issuer. So it's sort of a circular thing. As with this example, the older agent would have a public endpoint. Again, it depends on the agent here, but maybe there's some scenarios you would need a mediator here to register about that. But basically, if your agent has a public endpoint, they can be talked to directly. If they don't, they would be connected to a mediator. That message would be relayed. Right, really quick. We're kind of running out of time. Sorry, I didn't think it would take the full hour. So Akrita. So again, test client sends instruction to issuer and verifiers, spawns a bunch of holders, and the holders, they, request credential from the issuer over a period of time. You could have many different holders. For the WCT test suite, it's very simple. You have a test client, sends tests to different implementations. So they're going to be like, hey, issue a credential. I'm going to send an unsigned credential, get a credential back. You're like, hey, verify this credential. So you're going to send the signed credential and get a response back. So very simple. So now, if we have time, open discussion. What would we want to see moving forward? What kind of certification and reporting do people want to see in the community? So that was my presentation. I hope it was helpful. Is there any question? I know we're a bit stressed on time. Apologies for that.
This was awesome. Great presentation. Thank you for laying all this out. Are there gaps you've identified that none of the current test suites fully cover?
I think what I mentioned that I would like to see something in between the W3C VC test suite and the OpenWallet Foundation test harness, where we can really test implementations through specific scenarios. Like that's the one sort of combination I'm not really seeing at the moment. You can test implementations against specification, and then you can test frameworks in a scenario, but there's no way to test an implementer's implementation in a scenario. So that's really where I would like to see this happening. Also, this probably is another layer that needs to happen a bit further, because when we think of these VC test suite, like these implementations, they're meant to be just open testable, right? They're not very specifically configured in most of the time. So to have something that's a bit closer to the use case, like identify a specific scenario and be able to test different implementation in that scenario would be very interesting. So that's, for me, that's where I would see it, and have this as a report, right? And it would need to be a pleasurable experience, right? So I would like, because if we think about the BC Wallet showcase, right? So you have a showcase, it's well presented, you have a story. What I would envision is that you have the same experience of a showcase, but you get a report at the end, and the showcase is sort of carried by different implementations, right? So these kind of showcase as tests. So that's what I would like to see next. Yeah.
Yeah, cool, interesting.
I think Samuel has a.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So one thing that is a bit lagging behind maybe is the OpenID Foundation's conformance test, because the OID for VC and VP are kind of just maturing, and so the W3C and the Aries kind of test harness are much more mature. But I think that's at least one area of interest that many wallet and agent providers are really interested in supporting the OpenID for VC family of protocols. And kind of related to that is the European Identity Wallet certification. We will have 27 different certification schemes set by each member state for a few years before kind of harmonized certification schemes are defined. So I think maybe that's out of scope for this group, but maybe kind of just nice to know and to kind of align our ambition to kind of to take that into account.
Yeah, I think all sort of tests or certification efforts should be like on the radar at the very least, right? And should be on an implementer's mind when they choose what they want to spend time and effort developing in their software. You can try to, catch them all and get all the test passes, but oftentimes it takes time. So knowing what's out there is good to make decisions. Yes. And that's a good point for OpenID. There's like the maturity of these different frameworks is something to take into consideration, and the version change, specification evolved with time. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, maybe the OpenID Foundation is mostly interested in conformance testing, which is not quite the same as interop testing. So I'm not aware of anybody doing really OpenID for VC interop testing.
I see someone mentioned the animal demo doesn't work currently. Thanks for letting us know. I will let them know. Someone put this. I'm just opening some links that people think. So the pension demo, I will add that to the link. I did not know of these resources. So yeah, just feel free to comment on the slides. Add a comment. I think I've given the permission, and I'll add this. Maybe this slide can be transformed into a page that will live somewhere. I think it's nice to sort of aggregate links somewhere. So I'm just gonna.
That sounds great. I've added the link to the slides to the meeting page as well, so that those following along in the recording can find it as well.
Awesome. We'll stop my show now.
Awesome. Looks like we're just over time. Are there any final questions or thoughts? Great. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. Super interesting presentation. Join us, everyone, next Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Europe, Central Europe time, to hear Stephen present on DidWebVH. Our meetings will be on Mondays heretofore. So see you in less than a week, and thanks for joining, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Patrick.